Hello, everybody. Well, great to be here and to talk about a subject that has become quite a serious passion for me, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster journey in the last couple of years, really. I think Anne mentioned that it all started when I went to the Mill Road Festival, and I think most of you in Cambridge are so probably familiar with it. And I just could not believe the amount of waste that was generated in a city of less than 120,000 people. Bearing in mind they weren't all on Mill Road, in just 3 hours in one afternoon, and wherever there's a litter bin, there's just this huge mound. The council have done a fantastic job with these clear polythene bags of collecting the rubbish and the overflows from the bins and all the rest of it. It was just horrendous. And then the following week, the whole thing was reinforced by sitting at a McDonald's service extra station on the motorway and watching people, just as I was going to do in a couple of minutes, throw something in the bin. And I thought, this is just completely bonkers behaviour. So reduce, reuse and recycle is the mantra that's used by an organisation called WRAP, W-R-A-P, brilliant organisation that I've had a privilege of working with. And they are, if you like, the government lobbyists or the pressure group or whatever you might want to call them, that's responsible for helping UK solve our problem, which is 230 million tonnes of mixed waste. Predicted for this year, and we threw away 22 million tonnes of waste just as households last year into our bins, just an extraordinary volume. And as we probably know, hundreds of thousands of items that get sorted by households are still being sent to landfill, and there's a whole plethora of complicated issues that are impacting on that. And needs to say, of course, I don't know if you heard the staggering statistic last week, but the e-commerce industry in the UK in the last 10 months of last year was so phenomenal that it's exceeded the previous 2030 forecast. So the e-commerce industry has achieved 10 years growth in 10 months. And the inevitable fallout from that, I guess, if you like, is the fact that we're all getting more packaging at home, and more stuff ultimately that's been going to landfill. But critically, 15% of what is being separated for recycling by households is rejected, and there's a whole myriad of reasons why that's the case. They end up being incinerated, they can't be dealt with, they're contaminated or whatever, and it is getting worse because, in fact, the amount of waste that's going through the process and not being able to be recycled is increasing massively. So it's a perennial problem. And of course, food to go, which I referred to recently, is adding fuel to the problem. Not right now, of course, but it has been. And another staggering statistic here, every year in the UK alone, we send 11 billion items of food to go packaging to landfill. That's more than 20,000 items every minute of every day of stuff represented by some of those things in the bin that cannot be recycled. The reason why they can't be recycled is for three reasons. For takeaway packaging to function, whether it be a takeaway cardboard box or a takeaway coffee cup, they have to be coated in the plastic, because otherwise, stating the obvious, they just don't work. And the other thing, of course, is food contamination. So if packaging has got a plastic layer on it or plastic coating of some kind, or is contaminated with food, it goes straight into landfill. It doesn't even go for incineration in most places in the UK, because incineration isn't a big part of our energy generation problem. But progress is being made. We've had home composting bins in UK households probably for the last 10 years or so now. And when they were first introduced, people were horrified at the amount of waste in terms of food that was being generated. Suddenly people had a visual picture, didn't they, of what was going on. And it was really interesting that it did massively cut down on food waste. So that was great news. And businesses are doing all kinds of things to achieve what they can achieve, or what we need to achieve, rather. And our recycling target, that's to recycle 50% of everything that goes into waste, was achieved last year, which is great news. But unfortunately, it was 5 years beyond the original date. So it's taken a while to get there, but we have got there. And whilst we've left the EU, I'm delighted to say that it was confirmed in December last year that the initiative for plastic waste reduction, which was an EU piece of legislation, has been fully adopted by the UK. So we're still on track to do that. And the idea is that to reduce significantly the level of plastics going to landfill by 2025, so that the amount of single-use plastics that's being used are being reduced massively. And within those single-use plastics, as we've already alluded to, is the packaging that is related to food. So, you know, they're already part of that, but recyclable, reusable or compostable by 2025 is the objective of that legislation, which is all about making sure that the commitment that we made in previous legislation in Europe to make the environment a better condition for the next generation. If you look at the figures and what they're made up of, it's pretty staggering. I mean, food waste is still a big chunk, as indeed is garden waste. And if you look at plastics in particular, whilst they're a relatively small part of what goes on, of course, we know that they're a huge issue because they are so incredibly durable and so practical in many ways. And like so many wealthy Western countries over recent years, the easy solution for us has been to send it to third world countries to deal with. And of course, sadly, they haven't dealt with it in the way that we would hope. So I'm sure you've seen pictures of landfill sites next to rivers, and the waste has gone to the rivers and then it's ended up in the oceans, which is absolutely horrendous. But there's a long way to go. And the ultimate ambition is to achieve zero avoidable waste by 2050. So this is a 30-year program. We're not going to get there straight away. So what things can we do now, today, about all starting to play a part in what's going on? And for me, 2025, okay, it's now 4 years ago. It's 4 years away, sorry. But, you know, it's going to be here pretty damn soon. But we can all make changes now. And some of those changes are happening, some really, really good things going on. As we know, coffee shops have been encouraging their use for a while now. Fantastic. Waitrose, for example, you can't now buy coffee from Waitrose unless you go with your own reusable coffee cup. Marks and Spencer started doing a trial, encouraging people to bring their own reusable boxes for the deli counter, etc. Sainsbury's is doing the same. And M&S announced 3 weeks ago that they're extending that trial to all their food stores nationwide. So all those things are starting to happen, which is great. And the biggest culprit in the food to go issue, which is by a country mile, McDonald's, number one item on their corporate social responsibility program is to encourage reuse rather than recycle, and to find solutions that enable them to do that. Interestingly, in the States, Burger King, who, as we know, in general terms, seem to be always behind what McDonald's do, but they have actually introduced a reusable burger box. And there's a scheme called Loop, I don't know if you're aware of it, but they're using the Loop's collection service to make sure that these boxes get reused and re-delivered back to Burger King stores so that they can be washed and reused. So that's already starting to happen. Standardization of materials is also really important, because if you think about things like plastic bottles that we know are a huge visual culprit in what's going on, as well as a practical culprit, there are too many different materials being used currently, and that makes recycling a nightmare. So part of the thing that's going on with the Single-Use Plastic Pact is to make sure that materials are standardized. So caps are standardized, bottles are standardized, labels are standardized. And in doing that, then we've got material that can be more readily recycled. Increased composting, and this is one of the ones that really, really drives me mad, because at the moment it's a very, very difficult process. And we only have one refuse plant in the whole of the UK that has industrial composting capabilities within it. So we've got a consumer movement that's way ahead of what's practical in terms of materials and recycling. Composting, beg your pardon. Then, of course, we've got the closed loop reclaim process, which is a fantastic initiative, particularly for rigid plastics. And Tesco have got collection points in stores now where packaging for cosmetics, for example, can be returned. The thing that has been happening very, very positively for at least 15 years now is what's called lightweighting and reduced materials usage. And these are making phenomenal differences, and they have done already. If you look at that packaging example there, which is called a skin pack, the material that's used in that packaging compared to a conventional ready meal tray is only about 30%. If you buy a beer bottle, it's an example of, again, where a huge amount of what's called lightweighting is going on, or right weighting as it's also known, where they've reduced the physical content of the glass within the bottles by 10 or 15%, but still performs perfectly well as a bottle. M&S have led the way in new film technologies and film configuration technologies for fresh salads and vegetables, for example. And those initiatives have reduced material usage between 10 and 15%. But critically, they've improved the shelf life of the products within them as well. So it's been a double win. And of course, new solutions are coming on board all the time. Everybody's trying to find ways of delivering new things with compostable materials made from sugar cane, or indeed even wheat, or even parts of things like some of the soy processing, which is obviously growing massively. And the other thing that's really, really interesting, and I think we're going to see a lot more of this, is retail vending for fresh produce, so that you have chiller cabinets, effectively like a row of chiller cabinets, microwave size, where things like meats and vegetables aren't packed at all. They're available on the sheet of paper. And as one is removed, it gets replenished by the machinery behind the scenes. So it will remove the need for huge amounts of packaging. Some of these things are a little bit future thinking. Some of them are happening now, but it's very clear that in general, the message about reduced use, reusing and recycling is definitely getting there. Recycling has issues with it though, massive issues, as indeed does removing plastic from what's going on. If you think about a container lorry trundling along the motorway, amazingly, they're 60 foot in length. Don't seem that big, do they? But they are. And just as an example, if that lorry was full of glass bottles, 500 ml glass water bottles, it would be able to carry just 4,000 bottles. So that's 4,000 bottles in a glass container wagon. I meant to get out earlier and I didn't, so forgive me, I'm doing it now. I don't know if you've ever seen these or aware of them. That's how a plastic bottle starts life. It's called a preform. So these are made from plastic, they're engineered in plastic, and you get about 40,000 of these on the same container lorry. So you transport these to a factory to turn those into water bottles or drink bottles or whatever, 40,000 lorry compared to 4,000 glass bottles in a lorry. Aluminium is another material that's talked about being environmentally friendly because along with glass, it's infinitely recyclable. But the processing of bauxite to make aluminium is one of the dirtiest, most CO2 creating and most energy heavy industries globally. Industrially and environmentally, it's a nightmare. So, okay, we end up with a beautiful reusable material, but actually the bigger picture isn't all good news. So it's complex. As I've said already, lots of things going on, but we can all play our part undoubtedly by focusing on reuse, without doubt, rather than recycling or even indeed reduction, because the more stuff that we find a way of reusing, then it's going to give benefits to us all. Thank you very much.